Good evening to you. It's the last Tuesday in May, and we're tickled to be with you. So we've got some excellent questions that have been sent to us already by viewers. So we'll start with those. Here's a viewer who says, I'm wondering if my daughter, Susie, who's age 6, has ADD, attention deficit disorder. She will start getting dressed, notice something in the bedroom, start playing with it, or get involved with her sister, who is 3, and then she might further be distracted by something else. And her teacher wrote about her talking in the hall, stomping her feet on the bleachers in the gym, stopped at the drinking fountain without permission. And she sent home a report sheet that says, and I didn't quite understand this, but it says 0 problems, great job. 1 problem, I guess this is a recommendation from the school, no TV or games at home. 2 or more problems, extra responsibilities at home. If she gets 3 days of responsible and positive behavior, then she earns 45 minutes of computer game time. I guess this is recommendations for if she has certain behavior at school, then this is what happens at home. I'm not entirely sure what this means, but I guess this is her recommended consequences. Of course, the whole incentive program does not seem to be making any difference in Susie's behavior. So the question is what to do about this child. Now, does she have ADD? Well, I don't know. That takes, considerable testing and observation. But, we tend to be kind of quick to leap to diagnoses so that we can kind of write off a kid. It's like, well, this child is a problem, so instead of having to deal with the child, instead of responding to the child, loving the child, teaching the child, doing what we're supposed to do as parents, in other words, being responsible, we like to just write it off as a disorder. And that's just very tempting to do, as opposed to being responsible parents. So much easier just to go, well, we really can't help it because it's ADD. It's kind of a cheap solution. And then let's give her a pill, or just not feel responsible ourselves. So let's look at what's going on with her. I mean, she's 6. And 6-year-old kids are easily distracted, and she might be more distractible than most, maybe so. Whatever the case, our responsibility as parents is to love her and teach her. And the thing that we forget as parents is that loving and teaching a child never goes away. We have children, and they're not pets. So it's not like you stroke a pet and then you just send the pet out back. You put them out back in the yard. You put them in the back room. Children are amazingly time-consuming. And we often wish that weren't so. But they are. So we have an enormous responsibility to love and teach them all the time. So with this child, for example, and her getting ready for school, what we want to do is just say, well, just go in there and just get it over with. Well, she's 6 years old, and 6-year-olds need a little guidance. They need some help. So you're going to need to love her and teach her. And love and teach is one word. So it's going to be constantly, patiently guiding and teaching this kid all the time. So you might, for example, actually think. Parents don't do that. They tend to just go, I want this thing to get over with without me getting involved, without me having to think. Well, you have to. So if you want it to go quickly in the morning, you might do some thinking the night before. You might make it part of the bedtime routine that while the kid is, while you're more alert and conscious and don't have quite the time crunch, you might get the clothes out for the next morning. So instead of having this panic about what are we going to wear, get out everything that the kid's going to wear. So you don't have to go through that the next morning. You might have a routine that you calmly figure out while everybody's sane. So you know what time you have to leave in the morning. You know what time you have to go out the door. You know how long it takes to brush your teeth. You know how long it takes to get the clothes on. And so you have all this charted. And you have all of this marked on a great big clock in the kid's room. It's like parents intentionally make this difficult on themselves. And so you might do things like, on a great big clock in the kid's room, with great big hands on it, have it marked right on there for the big hand. You have marked on there, clothes. And so the kid knows that by the time the big hand gets to the place where it says clothes, the kid has to have his clothes on. By the time it gets to where the big hand says teeth, the kid needs to have his teeth brushed. And so on. Or, for example, you get a cheap little egg timer at Walmart or wherever. I'm not doing Walmart advertisements, but I'm just saying inexpensive. They're, $6. And you hand the kid a timer, and you set the timer for 6 minutes. And you say, you have these 6 minutes, and the kid can look at the timer, and the timer winds down. 6 minutes, 5 minutes and 59 seconds, it counts down. You have these 6 minutes to get your clothes on. As opposed to, go in there and get your clothes on. Well, you go in there and tell a kid to get his clothes on and don't give him some kind of time limit, and the kid's going to take, forever. Why should the kid hurry? What do they care? But you give them a time limit and you say, and then you carefully explain at the end of the 6 minutes, if you don't have your clothes on, if you don't have your clothes changed into your school clothes, then if you're half in your pajamas, then you'll go to school in whatever you're in. If you want to go to school half in your clothes and half in your pajamas, then fine with me, but then you're going to have to deal with the comments of your peers and have to explain to them why it is that you thought it was fashionable to go to school in your pajama bottoms. And after you've gone to school in your pajama bottoms, because each of my children had to go to school in their pajama bottoms or tops or something, or in their bare feet. Let me tell you, they've all done it. Ask them. After you've done it once, and your classmates have laughed at you all day long because you're in your pajamas, the next time your parents tell you to get your clothes on in 6 minutes, you'll be motivated. No kidding. Instead of parents nag, no. You just teach your kids what needs to be done. You show them how to do it. You make it easy for them to do it. You give them time limits. You help structure it for them. But nagging is just flat dumb. Then, after lots of teaching and loving and guiding and showing, only then do you do consequences, which is things like, if they don't do it on time, then you take away things like privileges, like, TV watching and computer use. Only then do you do consequences, like only after they have failed to do a thing several times, then you say, the next time that you don't have your clothes changed within the time limit, we're going to stop right then, and we're going to go straight to the car, and you're going to go to school in whatever you're in. So you don't do it the first time. You do it only after repeated failures. You'll get the point across. But the constant, carping at them, why aren't you ready? Hurry up. Parents who are constantly saying hurry up are idiots. They're taking the responsibility for the child's behavior. It's the children who need to take responsibility for their behavior, and it's the parents who aren't showing a sense of responsibility for teaching the child. And I suggest that you read the parenting book, Real Love and Parenting, which will give you oodles of ideas about how to teach this to the kids. Very productive. We wear ourselves out as parents, and we do it unnecessarily. Here's a reader who says, I was away from home this week, and when my partner phones when I'm away from home, he often makes comments like, I guess you're getting along fine without me. And when he does, I often feel so pulled on by him that it actually feels like a relief, when I'm away from him. I often feel like if I don't answer the phone, or if I'm tired, or if I'm not hanging on his every word, that he gets irritable with me, so I tend to play along. When what I really want to say is that I'm tired, And I don't want to talk about, how narrow his plane seat was and what color his hotel room is. So listen to what's happening here and learn from it, just from what you said just in the first few sentences. He said, I guess you're getting along fine without me. So what's he doing? He's just clinging to you. He's saying, so I guess you don't need me. So what he's really saying is he's not really sure that you love him. That's his part in it. Your possible part in it is that it may very well be that you're not sufficiently communicating your unconditional love for him, or he would be feeling it. Now, I don't know this for sure, but it's probable that you're not, or he wouldn't have to be hanging on to you like this. And then your part in this. It's pretty clear that you're kind of tired of this relationship. You're annoyed that you have to listen to him talk to you. You're not enjoying him, clearly. You don't want to hear what he has to talk about. You don't want to hear him describe his narrow plane seat. You don't want to hear him talk about his hotel room. And you're not only tired of him, but you're not being very unconditionally loving toward him, which kind of bolsters what I said earlier about his not feeling loved because of your attitude toward him. So it's not a criticism of you, but you're not very willing to listen to what he has to say. Now, whether what he has to say is interesting is irrelevant. The fact that he's your partner and is speaking about anything is reason enough to listen. So, not a criticism, just an observation that you're not listening to him very well. Which is why he's saying, you must be getting along pretty well without me. Then you continue. I've had a few sessions with a life coach, and he asked what I'd done with her, and I talked about it a little, and then he said he didn't really understand what I was saying. And again, I had that experience of not feeling seen by him. Am I right in that I'm getting the impression that he asks me about things, but really I'm not sure that he wants to hear what I talk about, or that he's unable to hear, or that he's not interested to hear? He phoned me again tonight, and I felt that we were just talking about trivial things, but I wasn't sure how to change the conversation. Can you give me some pointers? What I feel like I'm saying is that I'm tired of talking trivialities, and that I want to talk about things that matter. But how can I say this without sounding preachy? Also, I don't think it's that I can't talk trivial things, but it somehow seems that the deep stuff isn't there as well, so it feels superficial. So what's going on? I find a way to be happy with how it is with him, how he is, without trying to change anything, or do I just leave? I saw that he did take the Real Love book with him, but he hasn't mentioned reading any of it. I did feel a glimmer of hope when he took it with him, but then maybe I'm just kidding myself that he'll change, when really what I need to face up to is that I either accept the relationship as it is or I don't. So you've told me about some of your conversations with him before, about how you have an interest in spiritual and emotional things, much like you're expressing here, and he doesn't. How many times does he have to describe this to you before you get the point? You have a profound interest in these things. He's expressed to you in hundreds of ways now that his interest is that he does not have much of an interest in the things that you're interested in. So now you have a decision to make. You can either accept him as he is, not having an interest in these things that are of great interest to you, or you can leave. But you're apparently not going to change him, and you don't really have a right to change him. Now, is it possible for you to be happy being in a relationship where you don't have the same interests? Sure. Two people can be in a relationship and not have the same interests. For example, one person can be interested in canoeing and the other can be interested in rock climbing, and they can have a great relationship. Much harder, however, to have a great relationship with somebody where one person has an interest in, say, rock climbing and you can have disparate interest in superficial things, but if one person have zero interest in talking about emotional things, and the other person is interested in emotional things, that's going to be pretty tough to have a great relationship. Because, see, rock climbing and canoeing are not essential to a great relationship, whereas emotional interests are. Now, people don't have to have equal interest in emotional and spiritual things. Not at all. But in order for a relationship to be really rich, both people have got to have at least some interest in emotional things. Now, can a relationship survive? Yeah. One person can have zero interest in emotional and spiritual things, and if the other person is sufficiently loving, the relationship can still survive. So if you were married and your partner had no interest, you could still be a completely unilaterally, unconditionally loving person and still do all right in this relationship by just loving your partner. And he'd love it. And you could get sufficient unconditional love from other people, from God, by serving. You could be happy just loving him. But you're not married. You haven't already made a lifetime commitment to him. If you had, I'd say, gosh, stay with him and just practice loving him, and you'll discover you can have a reasonably good relationship. But you're not married to him. You haven't made a lifetime commitment to him. So why would you stay with somebody with whom you have not made a lifetime commitment, who has no interest in spiritual and emotional things? Why would you stay with that person when you could start over with somebody who does? It doesn't make very much sense to me. It doesn't make any sense at all, in fact. And yet, you keep staying with him. And you seem to do it out of fear. Because you're afraid, well, maybe I'm not going to find anything better. Or, gosh, if I left him, I'd feel alone. Well, gee, feeling temporarily alone would beat the trash out of being stuck forever for the rest of your life at least, with somebody who is really never going to fulfill what you're looking for. So, now what if I were talking to him? If I were talking to him, I would tell him that, if he wants to make this relationship go, he can continue to talk about superficial or what you call trivialities all he wants to. But if he wants to make the relationship rich and fulfilling, he's going to have to develop at least some interest in deeper things so that your relationship can blossom. So as we look for partners, it's pretty critical that we look for somebody who's at least got some interest in talking about unconditional love, in truth, in some element of spirituality, or the relationship will eventually reach a place of stagnation. And whether we have the more trivial things in common just isn't all that important. I've known hundreds and hundreds of couples who got together based on uncounted commonalities in the trivial things, and those won't keep people together longer than months, a few years, and they just don't last. You continued. You said, I know I wasn't very loving tonight. I felt I should be interested in what he was saying about the dinner they had at the conference and how hot it was and how poorly organized the conference was. But to be honest, I wasn't really that interested. Wouldn't it be better to say so, to say I wasn't interested? No. If you were really unconditionally loving, it wouldn't matter how superficial his conversation was. You would be interested in what he was saying just because the words were falling from his lips. When I'm talking to another person and I care about them, it's irrelevant to me what the subject of their conversation is. I'm fascinated by it just because they're saying it. Now, I wouldn't maybe be interested in that subject if I were just sitting by myself. I wouldn't look up that subject on the internet. I wouldn't read about it. That subject alone wouldn't be interesting to me. But if somebody I care about is talking about that subject, then I care about it while they're talking about it. So it's not trivial anymore because it's part of them. That's the point. And you refer to them as trivialities because at this point, you don't sufficiently unconditionally love him, which I'm just offering as an observation so that you can learn more about you, not as a criticism of you. Here's a viewer who says, is it possible to reparent yourself? I've often been told in therapeutic sessions that this is what I need to do, and that it's something I can do for myself. I'm sure that I can learn to treat myself differently than I was treated, but I wonder how much it's possible to do this without having experiences of what this might be like. I suppose it's the same thing as being told to love yourself when you've got no idea what this even looks like. Also, it seems that we are meant to be in relationships. So much of this self-help stuff seems to imply that somehow you can do all this on your own. We need to feel loved. All of us do. And if you've never had it, if you've never received it from anybody, pretty impossible to just generate love for ourselves. So, as you suggested, in the same vein, it would be pretty difficult then to reparent ourselves, which is kind of a popular self-help phrase in some books and some philosophies or psychologies, because reparenting is really just a way of saying loving ourselves, as you suggested, which I think is just really pretty impossible. We need each other. We need the love that we get from each other, which is actually delightful. It's not a form of codependency. It becomes pathologic only when we demand love from any one particular person. That's when it becomes a problem. As long as I put myself out there and say, here's who I am, I tell the truth about myself and allow myself to be loved by whoever is capable of doing that, then that unconditional flowing of love toward me becomes very healthy. And I can be reparented by anyone. Pretty much all of my misconceptions of the world have come from those who incorrectly parented me in the first place. That may have been my biological parents, it may have been my teachers, it may have been any number of other adults who took the role of parents, or in other words, anybody who was in a position of authority, and incorrectly taught me that the world was harsh, unloving, that I was bad, that I was unlovable, any number of untruths. In order to correct those misconceptions, those untruths, I need to be taught what is true by new parents or new wise men and women. And I can find those in any number of places. Gosh, it could be even in some cases people younger than me. Anybody who's just capable of loving me unconditionally. Here's a viewer who says, our 8-year-old son, Fred, has started being super angry all the time. My husband and I just want to run away when he gets like this. And see, that's the problem right there. You're doomed right off because he senses your fear. That's the whole reason this kid gets angry. He doesn't get his way. His blood boils. As soon as he sees you even flinch, as soon as he sees your facial expression even go, as soon as you tense up, you've lost. Actually, let me put it another way, because it's not really a contest. Not only have you lost, the kid loses. Because the whole idea is he's looking for a sense of, he doesn't feel unconditionally loved in the first place, or he wouldn't be acting like this. And so he's looking for something to replace it. So he gets angry. What do we always get from anger? Duh, power. And so when he blows up and he sees you even twitch, well, you've just rewarded his anger. And so what's he going to do the next time? He's going to get angry again, or he's going to get angrier in that particular instance. So if you feel like you want to run, if you feel intimidated, if you feel cowed by his anger, you're screwed, and so's the kid. So you have to be the parent, which doesn't mean the one in control. It doesn't mean the dominating one. It means the one who is the most loving, the one who is most wise, the one who is the most calm and peaceful. You can't flinch when this child gets angry. Boy, he senses it. Everybody senses fear. You continue. He yells a lot and tries to turn consequences around on us. He says things like, well, if you do that, or you don't do what I want, then I will take X away from you. This kid's great. Or I will do something else that you don't want him to do. So it's pretty obvious that this kid knows that you're afraid of him. It's like he thinks you're peers, or actually he thinks that he's the boss. He thinks he rules the house. You continue. We've tried sending him to his room or outside when he's out of control. I will count and give him consequences. We try hugging him sometimes, or if we can get him to talk, he usually gets better. Oh my gosh, this is still you speaking. That's a solution there. If we can validate him, this is a riot, you're figuring this out as you write. If we can validate him and let him know that we hear him, that will help a lot. He can then feel our love. Okay, well, what about the times that he's just too angry to talk to? So this is a riot because you're just writing as you're thinking. So, in the first place, this child is not feeling sufficiently loved. And so what most parents tend to do is they forget that step. They want to go straight to, let's do harsher and harsher consequences. Let's just beat this kid into submission. The child isn't feeling loved. So, we need to spend more loving time with this kid. It's difficult to think about being more loving to a child who is standing there having a temper tantrum and saying, I'm going to take things from you. I admit that's not, maybe our first inclination. But I have found it to be just striking when I'm working with parents and the child is right there in the room and the child is screaming, I want, and it's just screaming at the top of their voice. To just get right down on the child's level. Don't stand above them. You stand above a child and then now see it becomes a matter of who can intimidate who the most. Get right down on the child's level and say, so now, tell me what is it that you want? And tell me why you're angry. And you have to speak just as calmly and coolly as a summer's breeze. Because the more angry you get, the more frightened the child's going to become, and the child's going to respond by defending himself with what? Anger. So quit it. Be calm. So you need to spend lots of loving time with this kid, preemptively, before the child gets angry. Read to this child. Hug this child more often. Make lots of eye contact with this kid. Sit with the kid. I actually recommend this kid's 8. So you read the parenting book to this kid. One parent was telling me that they were reading the parenting book to a child who was, I think, 6. And the 6-year-old said, I like this book. This book understands me. This was a 6-year-old speaking to the parent. Now, the 6-year-old didn't understand everything happening on all the pages. Do you see what I'm saying? But the 6-year-old could feel that the book was about him and understood that it was about loving. And every night, the 6-year-old would say to his parent, read to me out of the parenting book. Because the 6-year-old felt the love coming from the parent's mouth and could feel not only the love coming from the words, but also felt that as his mother was reading the book, she was being more loving to him. Can't tell you how many times I tell parents, read the parenting book out loud to your child. And even have the child read some of the paragraphs. And they go, well, what good's that going to do? Just shut up and do it. It really will make a difference. until you do it, you just can't believe the difference that it makes. Kids want to be loved the most. Then, love and teach. So first comes the loving. Then you teach them with the loving. You teach him why he has to do certain things. So instead of just barking orders, you have to do this and you have to do this, you explain why you have to do it. Now, you can't always explain a why for everything, but it's okay to explain why for a lot of things. So why do I have to clean my room? Why? You explain the purpose of learning responsibility and why they have to do things. And because there's reasons for doing stuff. There's reasons that kids have to help around the house, because everybody has a job to do. He has to help just like everybody else has to work. He has to do a job because he has to learn how to be responsible. He has to help. Just teach him why. And the parenting book will actually give you the words because they're all in there. Then you have to be, third, you have to be absolutely consistent as you give him these jobs and you teach him these things. When you tell a child he has to do a job, you can't give him the job and then half the time follow up on it. That's a huge problem we have with our kids. We give them a job and then, half the time we let them get away with not doing it. This raises a child in a world that is just chaotic. Can you imagine what our world would be like if gravity worked half the time? Can you imagine walking? You're walking along and, every second minute there was no gravity. There are times that we think, oh man, gravity is such a drag. Oh, I'm so tired. All this weight. Way better that gravity is consistent than it was inconsistent, huh? Well, imagine driving a car. No, it's cool that the laws of physics are consistent. And children, even though they may sometimes chafe under our rules, are actually grateful when we're consistent with the guidelines that we supply, whereas it makes them nuts when we're not. Usually we are the problem. And consequences are last. First comes the loving, then the teaching, then the consequences are last. And you have to apply them with no fear and no anger. If you look afraid or you look irritated when you apply a consequence, you are dead. If he threatens you, well, if you do this, I'm going to do that, you just smile. You just say, no, that's not how it works. And you explain the consequences ahead of time so he's not surprised. And then you carefully explain. You say, now here's the consequence that will happen if you do that. Now remember, if you do this, when the consequence comes, you will have chosen the consequence. I won't be giving you the consequence. You will be. So, if you don't have your chores done by a certain time, then I won't be giving you the consequence of no television. You will be choosing the consequence of no television. So, I won't be taking it from you. You will be. So, it's not going to be something that was done to you. It will be something you chose to do. And then when it happens, you require him to explain to you why it's happening. So again, he doesn't feel like it's being imposed on him from some outside source. No, it's a natural consequence of something that he chose. Children need to get that they're not being punished by their parents, that consequences are a natural thing that happen to everybody. Just like if you decide to break the traffic laws in the state in which you live, you get consequences in the same way that the kid gets consequences for breaking laws. Everybody does. Here's a viewer who says, you made a comment about how when we learn, we make mistakes. And unfortunately, we hurt the people around us in the process as we learn. At what point do we apologize for the pain and the hurt that we cause? It's utterly unavoidable in the process of learning and growing to avoid making mistakes. We just have to do it. I mean, it's impossible to learn without being ignorant. So as we learn, we grow out of ignorance into a point of relative knowledge. And so that involves unavoidably making mistakes. Most of the time, we can't make mistakes in a vacuum. I can learn some intellectual things in a vacuum. I can read a book and learn some things in a vacuum, but most practical, emotional, and social mistakes are made in association with other people. And so it's fairly unavoidable that as I make these mistakes, I'm going to inconvenience people. I may hurt their feelings. I may get in their way. I may not give them what they want. I may be unloving toward them. Any number of things. So that's unavoidable. And because it's unavoidable, so it really comes down to the price that I pay for learning and growing. The bottom line is the price that I pay for being happy is hurting you. The price you pay for being happy is hurting me. The price we pay for happiness, all of us, is the pain of other people. It's suffering. Too bad. Now, I don't mean that in a cavalier way, so that as I learn and grow, if in the process I occasionally step on your toes, that doesn't mean that as I step on your toes, I'm going to turn to you and say, well, gee, that's just tough. That's the price of learning and growing. Did you not read the memo? No, that's not my attitude. I'm just saying that intellectually that is a fact, that it's unavoidable. So I'm not going to look at that in a dispassionate way. I'm not going to be cavalier about it. I'm not going to... So when I do step on your toes, when I do hurt you, then what I'll do is simply tell the truth about it. And I will say, when I was having a conversation with you yesterday, I realize now that I was being selfish and unkind, and I'm going to be more careful about that in the future. That is far more productive than for me to just go, well, I was rude yesterday, I'm sorry. Much more effective to tell the exact truth about what I did and what I'm going to do in the future so that I don't do it again. Whereas just simply saying, well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry is often just kind of a way to get you to not be mad at me. Now, if I want to tell the truth and then in addition, as kind of an addendum, as like a dessert, a little cherry on top to the telling of the truth, if I want to also say, and I'm sorry that was painful to you. Great. But adding I'm sorry to the truth is far more effective than making I'm sorry the main course. So, no, I do think it's effective to apologize for our mistakes. But we need to recognize that the mistakes are necessary and then not continue to agonize over them, feel guilty for them, to punish ourselves for them, and certainly not to punish other people for the mistakes that they make with us in the process of their learning. Here's a reader who said, I just finished reading Real Love and I enjoyed it very much. There are many things that I'm going to try in my everyday relationships. I've met a lady on a dating site and we've been emailing each other quite a bit. Natalia lives in the Ukraine and we have talked about meeting in person. She wants me to come and visit her in the Ukraine, which is great with me. I agree with her that meeting in person is important to see if we want to take the relationship farther. We've shared many personal things with each other, likes, dislikes, and so on. We've been very open, honest, and truthful with each other. I've also listened to some of your daily conversations with people, questions and concerns. Now, keep in mind that I'm not going to tell you personally what to do or not to do, like marry this woman or go to the Ukraine, because that's really none of my business. But I can share with you a wealth of experience gained from working with a lot of other people. So I'm just going to give you some kind of overall impressions and recommendations about some things that you might think about. And as you talk about a relationship on the internet with somebody from the Ukraine, at least 2 or 3 concerns pop into my head. First, if you're needing a relationship with somebody far away and on the internet, there's a strong possibility that you probably have a difficulty, if not an inability, to have relationships with women, or you'd be having relationships with women who are closer to you. Now, that's not an accusation. I'm just telling you that is an overwhelming pattern I've seen with men who are striking up relationships with foreign women on the internet. Every single man that I've ever known, and I've now known, a lot of them, every man I've ever known who has struck up an internet relationship with a woman from another country has had a striking disability when it comes to having relationships with women. And that's a real problem, because then they think that, well, if I can't have a relationship with women closer around me, maybe it will be easier with somebody who's far away. Well, that's a tantalizing thought, but it turns out not to be true in every single case. So I would encourage you to think about that. Internet relationships are virtual. They're not real. They're kind of like playing house. And eventually you have to meet this person, and then you have to have a real relationship, and it's no easier than any of the relationships you've ever had difficulty with at home. In fact, they're harder. So I usually recommend to these guys that they practice having relationships at home first. Why? Because they're simply much easier to practice with. They're cheaper. They're easier. Much easier to practice at home with somebody who's 2 miles away than to travel to the Ukraine and practice, which is a lot farther than next door. Second, foreign internet brides, and I've done this now with quite a few guys, tend to be looking for American husbands for a way to get out of the place where they live. They're not looking for American husbands because American husbands are famous for being great at relationships. You really need to think about that. They're looking to move here for a place to live, not because they think their husbands will be great. They're looking for a living. So, could you develop a great relationship with this person? Well, sure, maybe, but why start a relationship when imitation love is almost certainly the declared foundation of this relationship, when they're coming here looking for, essentially a way to earn food and house. Third, life is hard enough, relationships are hard enough without introducing all the language and cultural barriers to start with. It's exotic and fun to date, somebody from, the Ukraine or wherever, but relationships are tough enough without adding several other barriers. And so for about 20 different reasons, starting off a relationship with somebody from the Ukraine is fraught with difficulty, is what I'm saying. And so, as you know, I wrote to you and I asked you for a little bit more information and discovered that you live in the United States. You've been married before, and so has this woman from the Ukraine. That you have a couple of kids. Your marriage lasted 6 years. You were married right out of high school. That when you got married, your first wife was expecting at the time with your first child. That you've had one other relationship in all these years, and are not very experienced in relationships. So I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying that because that's pretty common for men to not be very experienced in relationships. I'm just saying that being inexperienced with relationships, what I would suggest is that you learn a great deal more about real love, that you would learn a lot more about what unconditional love is, that you go to the website, that you participate in the conference calls that you can go to every day of the week, that you talk to people who are experienced in real love, that you practice telling the truth about yourself, that you tell people all about yourself, tell them all about your experience in relationships, that you practice having relationships with other men, that you practice having relationships with women that are not going to be having an exclusive sexual relationship with you, that you practice doing that, having non-sexual, healthy, unconditionally loving relationships with people before you even think about having a dating or marriage kind of relationship with anybody, much less with somebody from another country. Or what will tend to happen is you'll be so excited about this new and exotic relationship is that you'll just run into it headlong, and it will be virtually unavoidable. Only because I've seen this how many thousand times now. You'll run into it. It will be exciting. It will be fun. You'll be thrilled. You'll just be head over heels. And unless you're the one exception, I know, it will begin to fall apart. And it'll be just as exciting as can be for a while, but we can't help it. Imitation love is just too seductive. And then the misery begins. When the imitation love fades away, all hell breaks loose. And then we go, well, what happened? Well, it's really quite predictable. When we don't have enough experience with real love, all the rest of it will just suck us in. The failure of imitation love is catastrophic. And you've already experienced that in your life. You really don't want to go through it again. So I would just recommend more foundation in real love before you hop on a plane and run off to the Ukraine. You continue. I have mixed feelings about marriage, not opposed or against it. If you truly have real love, then to me marriage does not factor into it unless your partner or yourself want to. To me, real love can and will exist if we're truly honest with ourselves and admit, recognize, communicate, among other things, to ourselves and our partner. So, can you have a real love relationship without marriage? Sure, I suppose. But if marriage is no big deal, then why do so many people diligently avoid it? And the reason is because people really do they're really afraid of the huge commitment that they recognize that marriage is. They want a way out. They want a back door. They want a parachute. They want an escape. And they very often take it. Marriage itself already has a sufficiently high divorce rate. When people are not married, and these are statistics that are not taken, what is the rate of people leaving non-married relationships? Well, those numbers aren't kept. But having known thousands of non-married couples now, I can tell you that it's much higher than the married divorce rate. People just leave on a whim. I'm tired of you. Goodbye. It's done that easily. Poof. If it's difficult to leave a marriage, if people leave each other in a married relationship at a rate of greater than 50%, and they'll leave at 50% where it's just hard as can be. When you have to get attorneys and leave children, and at what rate do you think they'll leave their partner when all they have to do is pack up their bags and drive away in the car? People do it regularly. And will often leave a partner every 6 months when they're not married. So there really is something to making the recommendation that, and I recommend to people that they refuse to enter into long-term committed relationships unless they're married. There is an enormous stability that is conferred on a relationship when two people get together and they say, and this is what happens in marriage, I commit to stay with you no matter what. I commit to stay with you while I learn to love you unconditionally. That is what a marriage commitment is. It's not, I'm going to get out of you what I can. It's, I commit to stay with you while I learn to love you. And if people understood that, well, marriages would last even all the longer. But just a suggestion. Your next question is, you said, should we wait to have sex with our partner until we have united in marriage? I understand about imitation love and getting and protecting behaviors and free will and choice. I've read several books about ladies in Russia and the Ukraine, and they mention that it is a good idea to have sex with our lady partners. Of course, they give guidelines that they talk about before trying this with your partner. What are your thoughts on this? Obviously, you can do whatever you wish to do, but if you go to the Ukraine, for example, and if you have sex with your partner while you're in the Ukraine, you're going to have absolutely no idea what your relationship is like from that point on. You're going to have no clue. You're going to have such an unbelievable abundance of imitation love now from this woman in the form of praise that you get from, because you're going to feel like the man. I mean, if she's having sex with you, the sense of value that you're going to get from being sexually attractive to her is just going to be overwhelming. You're going to just feel like the center of the universe. The sense of power that you're going to get from the praise because you will have gotten her to have sex with you. The sense of pleasure, obvious. So praise, power, pleasure, the amount of imitation love that you will be getting is just going to be like a train load of imitation love. So overwhelmed with this train wreck of imitation love, you're not going to have any clue whether you are having an unconditionally loving relationship with this woman. So you're going to say, well, I'm in love. That's why people say they're in love, is because they have an abundance of imitation love. Then you're going to say, well, gee, come back to the United States with me, or let's get married, or let's move in together, or whatever. Those feelings are so overwhelming, you're going to be positive that it's love. And then, when that wears off, the disappointment is bitter. It's just devastating. So, you can try it, but that's the problem with sex, is that it's such a distraction, it's such a deception, such a substitute for real love. So overall, again, I just recommend that you learn more about real love, that you read Real Love and Dating, for example, learn about relationships, and just be more prepared. That's all. And not trying to be a killjoy either. Just too much experience doing this. Let's see, the ex-girlfriend question. Let's see. I got logged off for a second. I have an ex-girlfriend. This is from a viewer who's on here tonight. I have an ex-girlfriend who I still deeply care about. She's an aspiring opera singer, and I recently offered to sponsor a show that she wants to put on. I was not expecting anything from this except the pleasure of helping her. However, since becoming involved, she has been very critical of me, and I have felt very hurt that she would behave like this when I'm being so kind to her. I tried my best to explain how I feel, but she just can't see her own behavior and how unfair she is being. I also tried consequences, but these have led to me telling her that I am withdrawing my sponsorship. Now I feel I have become controlling as a result, and I feel I should proceed with the sponsorship despite having lost the heart for helping her put on the show. I also feel guilty about the prospect of letting others down that are involved in the show. I want to help, but to avoid being abused, how can I achieve this? Sounds complicated, doesn't it? So she's an ex-girlfriend, which is very complicating to you. So there must be some kind of old feelings for her. So when we offer a gift to somebody, we have to decide, do we want to really do this for them and offer it unconditionally or not? And then decide whether we can let go of any need for being rewarded by kindness, gratitude, recognition, appreciation, anything. And here you've said that she has been critical, unappreciative, and so on. And that bothered you. You said you felt very hurt, which proves that you expected that she would be somewhat appreciative, or at least not be critical. So what do? You can do anything you want to do. And that's the thing you need to understand. You can say, for example, I will continue sponsorship of the show, but here's what I require from you. And see, any producer can do this. You have to divorce yourself from the idea that she's the ex-girlfriend and you have all this emotional stuff involved. Any producer of any show, any sponsor, anybody putting money into a show can say, I will put money into a show, I will put X into a show, but here are my conditions. Love has no conditions, but perhaps sponsorship does. You just have to decide what you're going to do. So make that clear to her. You could say, I will sponsor the show, but if we're going to do sponsorship of the show, I require that our relationship look like this. I will help you, but I'm really not interested in hearing your criticisms of me. I don't require any gratitude or appreciation, but I require that we have civil conversations. And if you want to continue to be critical of me, I'll withdraw my sponsorship of the show. I at least wanted it to be a semi-pleasant experience for me. So if it's not going to be, then I'm going to withdraw because I really wasn't looking for this to be stressful. I was willing to help you, but I really didn't want it to add to any unpleasantness in my life. Nothing wrong with saying that, because you weren't really planning on offering her your love, your emotional support. You were just going to offer her some help for her show. But you see, you need to make it clear. If your support for her is conditional, say so. If your support for her is unconditional, then you have to learn from this. See? It just has to be clear to you in your own mind. If you are unconditionally helping her, then when she's critical, then you have to say, hey, she's just drowning. And in my mind, I was going to help her unconditionally no matter what she did. So she's just drowning, and I'm not going to be bothered by this. And if I am being bothered by it, it's evidence that I'm the one who's requiring something from her, and I'm not being loving. So you're the one here who has to be truthful about whether you're offering this unconditionally or conditionally. And if it's unconditionally, you don't need to say anything to her. That's a decision you make, and you're done with it, and you do the whole thing to yourself. If it's conditional, then you need to tell her what the conditions are, state it clearly, and stick with the conditions. See how simple? So it's all about which way you want to go and how loving you want to be. But that's your choice. You're not obligated in any way. All your decision. What a hoot, huh? So, it's been a very fun chat, and we've reached the end of our time. So, been delighted to be with you. Look forward to being with you next week, which will be the first Tuesday in June. And between now and then, remember, as always, that it's always about real love. We'll see you then. Bye.